All right, let's get into it. Today, we're going to unpack a topic that, well, every single one of us is chasing after: happiness. We're going to dig into the fascinating science behind what it really means to live a happy life, and we'll be guided by some pretty incredible research. So let's kick things off with the biggest question of them all.
Seems simple enough, right? I mean, we all know it when we feel it. But as we're about to find out, the answer is way more complicated and, frankly, way more interesting than you might think. It turns out how you answer that question really depends on which part of your brain is doing the talking.
So to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to start with the work of Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman. He's the one who uncovered this huge paradox at the heart of how we think about happiness, a kind of conflict between two very different parts of ourselves.
Kahneman tells this amazing story to explain it. Picture this: someone is listening to a symphony, and it's absolutely breathtaking. For 20 straight minutes, they are just lost in the music, totally in the moment. But then, right at the very end, there's this horrible, loud, screeching sound. And later, when they're asked about it, they say that final screech ruined the whole experience. But I mean, did it really? Think about it. It didn't ruin the 20 minutes of actual pleasure they experienced. No, it only ruined the memory of the experience.
And that little story perfectly highlights the two selves Kahneman talks about. On one side, you have your experiencing self. This is the part of you that lives completely in the present moment, second by second. It's always asking, how do I feel right now? But then you have the remembering self. And this self, well, it's your inner storyteller. It doesn't really care how long something lasts. It just cares about the highlights, the big moments, the low points, and, most importantly, how the story ends. It's the one making all your future decisions based on those edited memories.
So, let me ask you this. Here's a little thought experiment. Imagine you're planning your dream vacation. But there's a catch. At the very end of the trip, all your photos will be deleted, and you'll be given a pill that makes you forget everything that happened. Would you still pick the exact same vacation? If you hesitated even for a second, you've just felt that clash between your two selves. Are you choosing for the actual experience, or are you choosing for the memories you get to keep? And this all boils down to two fundamentally different questions we can ask ourselves about happiness. Asking, am I happy in my life? That's a question for your experiencing self. It's about your day-to-day, moment-to-moment feelings. But asking, am I happy with my life? Now that's a question for your remembering self. It's about your overall satisfaction when you look back. And here's the kicker. You can be really happy with one and pretty miserable with the other.
Okay, so this whole conflict between our in-the-moment feelings and our grand life story is exactly why scientists needed a much clearer way to talk about all this. To actually study happiness, they had to go beyond just one fuzzy word and create a much more precise idea. And that idea is called subjective well-being.
Subjective well-being, or just SWB for short, is basically the scientific term for happiness. And the definition is pretty straightforward. It's how a person evaluates their own life. These evaluations get split into two buckets: cognitive, which is just a fancy way of saying what you think about your life, and affective, which is all about what you feel day to day.
So to measure this stuff, scientists look at three main ingredients. First, there's positive affect. That's how often you feel pleasant emotions, things like joy or excitement. Then there's negative affect, how often you feel the unpleasant stuff, like anger or sadness. And finally, there's life satisfaction. That's the cognitive part, your overall thoughts and judgments about your life as a whole. Your total subjective well-being is really just the balance of all three.
Okay, so if well-being is this mix of good feelings and feeling good about our life, how do we actually get more of it? Well, that's where the work of another super influential psychologist, Martin Seligman, comes into play. He argued that there isn't just one single road to happiness, but actually three very different paths we can take.
The first path he calls the pleasant life. This one's all about what it sounds like: maximizing positive feelings, seeking out simple pleasures, enjoying a great meal, watching a funny movie, that kind of thing. The second path is the engaged life, and this one's deeper. It's about figuring out your unique strengths and finding activities that get you into that state of flow, where you're so absorbed you lose track of time. And the third, and maybe the most profound, is the meaningful life. This is all about using your personal strength to serve some purpose that's bigger than just you.
But Seligman didn't stop there. He later expanded on these ideas to build an even bigger, more complete model for what he calls a flourishing life. It's known by the acronym PERMA, and it's basically a fantastic roadmap for long-term well-being. So this PERMA model gives us 5 essential building blocks for a truly flourishing life. And as we're about to see, each element is its own thing, but they all work together to create this really stable foundation for our overall happiness. Let's break it down really quick. P is for positive emotions. That's the bedrock, feeling good. E is for engagement, that state of flow we just talked about. R is for relationships. We are social creatures after all, and we need strong connections to thrive. M stands for meaning, that super important sense that our life has a purpose. And finally, A is for accomplishment, which is that sense of satisfaction we get from chasing and hitting our goals.
Now, all this sounds fantastic, right? But let's be real. We all know being happy isn't always that easy. So we have to talk about some of the big psychological and even evolutionary roadblocks that get in our way.
Ever wonder why getting that new phone or that big promotion feels amazing for about a week? Well, that's something called the hedonic treadmill. It's this built-in tendency we have to just get used to things and return to our normal baseline of happiness, no matter what good or bad stuff happens. We get the raise, we feel great for a little while, and then we're right back where we started, looking for the next thing.
Another huge hurdle is our brain's negativity bias. Get this, scientists have shown that the psychological pain of losing something, let's say $100, is way more powerful than the joy you'd feel from finding that same $100. Our brains are just hardwired to react more strongly to threats and losses than they do to equal gains.
And why is that? Why are we wired that way? Well, it turns out a lot of our so-called negative emotions are actually an evolutionary feature, not a bug. Things like anxiety, jealousy, anger, these weren't design flaws. For our ancient ancestors, they were super important survival tools. Anxiety kept them from getting eaten, jealousy protected their family bonds. We basically inherited a brain that's designed for survival, not necessarily for 24/7 bliss.
But, and this is a big but, here comes the good news. We are not just stuck with our ancient brain wiring. Not at all. Science has actually pinpointed some very real, evidence-based strategies we can all use to actively build more well-being into our lives. So let's run through 10 of them.
Okay, so this first batch of strategies is all about taking proactive control of your life. We're talking about things like managing your time so you feel like you're in the driver's seat, finding work that actually engages your skills so you can find that state of flow, and even realizing that sometimes just the simple act of faking a smile can actually make you feel a little bit better. It's all about taking charge of your world, both inside and out.
And this next set of strategies really reminds us of some fundamental human truths. Things like making our close relationships a priority, which is one of the biggest predictors of happiness, and just taking care of our bodies by getting enough sleep. But they also point to a huge shift in mindset, actively practicing gratitude for what we already have and turning our focus outward to help other people, which you'll notice brings us right back to that idea of living a meaningful life.
So after going through all of this, the final question really isn't about just understanding happiness, it's about doing something with that understanding. Looking back at all those strategies, what is one small, totally manageable thing you could do today to invest in your own well-being? Because as all this science shows, lasting happiness isn't something you just find. It's something you build, one small, intentional choice at a time.